Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range U.S.-focused forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. Well, one of the things I want to start off with here is by showing you what was going on last year versus this year. So over here on the left, I have May 15th to the beginning of August, and over here on the right, I have May 15th to the beginning of August for this year. So 2018 is over here on the left. Now, when you're looking at these two particular images, I want you to see the major differences over Greenland. In 2019, we have had this strong Greenland block. It has been at time phased with the Scandinavian block and also with a block over Alaska. And in 2018, well, that block was almost completely out of phase, 180 degrees away from what it is now. In other words, we had a deeper trough in that area. So these last 2 years have been starkly different from one another. And throughout this entire video, I want you to pay attention to what I'm continuing to see happen over Greenland. Now, before we get into that long range, a quick update about the short term. Over there on the left, we have the last 30 days in terms of percent of normal precipitation. We've had sun pockets in the middle part of the United States that have been exceptionally dry. I'm talking about parts of western Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Meanwhile, come up into parts of the Corn Belt, parts of eastern Iowa through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and parts of Michigan, also dry, while the north central plains getting over to the Great Lakes states have seen round after round after round of very heavy rain and a lot of severe weather. When we look at this, I want to focus in, because we talked about this in Monday's video, about this region right in through here in parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. This actually even extends, like I said, up into parts of Michigan as well. That particular corridor right there in the heart of the Corn Belt, well, we did get some rain in there recently, but we're trying to understand the longer-term implications of the developing drought in that area. And just to let you know, 20% of the Corn Belt, and I define the Corn Belt here, okay, so you can see this particular area, 20% of the primary Corn Belt currently is sitting at 50% or less compared to normal on rainfall over the last 30 days. And that is despite some of the heavier rains that we just saw. Now, to continue with this analysis, take a look at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. We have continued to see our larger ridge sitting here, bringing a lot of showers and storms throughout the Intermountain West. The lingering boundary sitting over here over the southeast, again, widespread but very heavy local thunderstorms. We can see the northern plains continuing to get round after round after round of strong to severe weather. But notice as this last complex of thunderstorms went through, which we analyzed on Monday, we saw a large corridor right in through here that missed out on a lot of this precipitation. And that extends down here into parts of Tennessee, well, really into Kentucky and parts of West Virginia as well. And even the rain that you saw coming through this area here was not very heavy for some folks. Some of us measured less than 1/10 of an inch of rain over that time period. Right here in Champaign, where I'm from, we measured 3/100ths of an inch. And today I'm going to be driving later this morning up to Moline, Illinois, where we were doing that analysis, trying to understand how dry that I-74 corridor is. And let me get those drawings up there so you can see a little bit clearer, but I want to bring you back to that analysis and show you this is all that we got up there as that thunderstorm cluster moved through the Quad Cities area. That's a very productive part of the United States, which means very wet, moving over to very dry. And I'm anxious to see what the crops look like as I travel I-74 through this direction in Illinois today. All right, so we'll report back to you on what we see here. Okay, in the near term, where's the severe weather going to be? Tucked away right in through here. On that previous map, you probably saw that parts of Nebraska, especially two regions in parts of Kansas, eastern Kansas, have been absolutely socked in the last couple of days, last week or so, even with a lot of severe weather and very heavy rain, while western Kansas has been so dry. Well, major region in through here also undergoing heat advisories today. Same thing going on in parts of Washington State. Well, the pattern that's getting us here is quite active, and let me show you what it's doing right now in terms of precipitation. This early morning cluster of thunderstorms is racing down this corridor. We're going to watch for a second round to follow in its tracks in the following days. You ready? So some short-term stuff here first. Watch this particular cluster as we play forward. Through the day on Wednesday, presses through parts of Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas, and then you see the follow-up here on Thursday right there, Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon, pressing across the same region. So I'm expecting some locally very heavy rains in southern Nebraska, eastern half of Kansas, getting over into Missouri. Northern plains, you're continuing to see pop-up showers and storms that are going to also move through parts of Michigan and Indiana, but there's a big quarter that is missing out on this rainfall in the eastern Corn Belt over the coming days. Storm Prediction Center got a close eye today on 3 regions. We're going to watch these 3 areas while this pocket here misses all the thunderstorms. And then tomorrow there is a slight risk right in here into parts of the eastern Corn Belt getting over into Pennsylvania and New York. We're going to talk about that in the forecast video that'll come out tomorrow, but I just want to give you a quick update so you're watching it with me. Now, here's where we get into the meat of this. We are seeing right now that this omega pattern is still well in place as we progress through the middle of this week. Big ridge over the southeast and overall weaker flow moving like this through Canada. All right. Question is, when do we break this down? What does that breakdown look like? And does this northwest flow continue to favor a track in through here of very active weather? That's some of the questions we're going to be asking ourselves. Looking first at precipitation, well, we see the northwest flow keeping things active here in the north central plains over the next week. This is only out 1 week. We see this corridor getting a lot of heavy rain in the next 48 hours, still continuing to be quite active. Eastern Corn Belt, there are pockets that are very dry. I mean, look where I'm going today. This particular region in Iowa and Illinois, they're not showing up with much precipitation in the operational Euro, but some chances for more storms as we get over into parts of the Eastern Corn Belt. Texas, you are high and dry. In parts of the Pacific Northwest, well, this trough will be dislodged very soon. It will be coming in over the weekend. We'll be watching this quarter for some strong to severe storms as well. Canadian prairies, you're also looking at a wetter bias with this flow pattern weekly moving through Canada. And what do you not see? You don't see any influence of major tropical systems coming into play here. Now, week 2, things really start to break down, and our predictability out even to week 2 right now is relatively low. European ensemble on the left, GFS on the right. They have some agreement that that corridor in through there looks to be wet. Where they disagree right now is over parts of the Eastern Corn Belt and parts of the Mid-South. The GFS model, as I've been explaining, will not handle very well the tropical thunderstorms, the tropical type thunderstorms that we get this time of year along the Gulf Coast, whereas the European is going to do a better job picking up on that. But something to notice, it looks as though we might be seeing a weakening of the southwestern monsoon temporarily, and Texas, I'm sorry, but most models have you continuing to stay on the drier and much warmer than average side of things. Putting it all together over the next 2 weeks, again, look at the corridors that are showing up wet. And we kind of see that in both models here. All right, Texas still dry. This is not an area well resolved by the GFS, better resolved by the European model. And the question I'll be having in all my short-range forecasts is how much rain can we get over here to the parts of Eastern Corn Belt? That will be the trick in the forecast because the GFS is wet, and the European model right now is not showing that major wet bias like the GFS is. All right, the complicating factors, 1, 2, 3, there they are. These tropical systems called typhoons over here in the West Pacific, they will be absorbed into the mid-latitude flow. And the problem with this time of year is when these tropical systems get going in the West Pacific and they get absorbed into the mid-latitude flow, that's the jet stream, they can perturb things in the 10 to 20 day time period that will not be resolved by any global model, that we really just struggle with our global models at picking up on this. I'm talking about the GFS and the Euro. That is one source of uncertainty moving forward. Another one, right now we see that the main development region here in the Atlantic is very convectively suppressed. And even though we have tropical waves coming off of Africa, the environment right across the main development area here in the Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico is not conducive to developing tropical systems, at least over the next 5 to 10 plus days. So this is quite a difference here in hemispheres is where we're expecting to see a lot of tropical cyclone activity. How does this translate into temperatures? Well, by the day 5 through 10 time period, which is what you're looking at here, we will finally dislodge that omega pattern and bring a trough into parts of the Pacific Northwest. So this is going to be showing up this weekend. That's why I got the severe weather risk there. You can see that much of the southern region stays on the warm side. Texas, you're going to continue to bake under this pattern, and above average temperatures return to the south. Once we get over here to the GFS, there's a slight cooler bias compared to the euro across the northern half of the US, but this is so slight it's almost going to be imperceptible to many of us, but Texas stays warm. What about the days 10 through 15 pattern? The European model still picking up on the broader heat here across parts of the Four Corners in Texas, but extending that heat into the Corn Belt. The GFS is right on track with this. You can still see both of these models wanting to bring in some warmth as we progress here into the mid part of the month of August. Stretching this out to the end of August, we see that the the ensemble from the Euro wants to bring in a much above average temperatures across a big section of the United States. This is very consistent with the picture we've painted in the last two videos where I said August has the potential to be on the warmer side of things. It will not be a record hot August. Things are not in configuration to do that, but it is on the slight warm bias overall. What had me intrigued was the warmth that I started to see building here. And take a look at this. When we compare the newest long-range model run from the European model, now this goes all the way up to the first week of September, to the old one, we've started to see some major differences. The newer run is really building in a lot of warmth here in parts of Alaska and Western Canada and the Western United States. And in previous runs, well, you just didn't see it there. It had more heat stretching into this area. And this has got a lot of us kind of scratching our heads trying to understand why are we seeing such high model-to-model variability. Well, what I want you to do with me is I want you to understand a few of the major reasons why I don't have any trust in the long-range forecast. One is model run to model run variability. We call it dprog dt. That is very, very large right now. High change in model prognosis run to run. So what do you have to do? We need to watch the new updates of this, which come out every 4 days together. That's why I produce such frequent weather videos, so we can continue to see this, the models picking up on their own trends. But this is probably going to get a lot of people concerned right in through here. Like, wait a minute, you're saying by mid-September we could have some cold air spilling out of Canada into the midsection of the country. And some of you in the Northern Plains are going, wait. We've had frosts in mid-September before, and that's got us quite concerned. I need to do something here to help us understand how to interpret that, and that's what I want to spend the rest of this particular video doing for us, okay? So major model run to model run adjustments. If I had to break this down into one thing, why are we seeing the new model runs showing up cool? I got to come back to my story about Greenland. We have seen so much this summer and spring, the big Greenland block, with the negative North Atlantic oscillation pattern. It's been stuck like that for a while. We've also seen ridging over Scandinavia and deeper trough over here over the Russian wheat belt. That's given us this a bit more, kind of omega type pattern over Alaska. So Greenland has really dominated our flow, and this is what the model is seeing that is different. So come over here to the forecast for the first week of September. What it's now doing is trying to keep or build that ridge in the western United States. It is trying to break down a broader trough here between Greenland and the Hudson Bay. And you see the height rising over here. Well, that would be a complete opposite of what we've had so far over much of 2019 spring and summer. So the models are calling for a breakdown, and many of us are kind of scratching our heads looking for the cause of this breakdown. It may be kind of a useless endeavor at this point because these model runs are so sensitive to any small perturbations, but we're going to go looking anyway, because they seem to be carrying into the longer term forecast as well. Now you've got 6 maps here, and all the maps on top are from the July 5th long-range model run from the European model. And this was for August, this was for September, and this was for October. Well, on August 5th, we got brand new runs. And this is the new August forecast, September forecast, and October forecast. Now, you probably noticed the major differences. In the midsection of the country, we went from what looked to be a warmer pattern as we progressed through fall to now showing up with a cooler bias. Now, before you worry too much about this, please see the color bar. This is the European ensemble picking up on between a 1 to 3 degree bias in cooler weather here. And you guessed it, where we get this is also we're expecting to see a much wetter pattern. And I'm looking at this model run to model run difference here, trying to understand what's causing it. And when I start looking for things, I'm taken to this map. we've seen a few things happen. In our eastern El Nino regions, we've started to see cooler water surface. We've been talking about now for, 2 months. We've seen the western El Nino region hang on to its slight warmer bias. We've seen the North Pacific warm, we call that, honestly, the North Pacific warm blob, also more scientifically referred to as the positive phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And we've seen sea ice here north of Alaska and between Greenland and the Hudson Bay really be reduced compared to its climatological average. The other wild card, look at the cooler water sitting here well south of Greenland off the northeast part of the United States. Now, oftentimes these ocean temperatures hold a bit of a clue as to what to expect moving forward. And I'm telling you, we are in a time period of very low predictability, but I'm at least going to try to do an analysis of this to see if I can understand a little bit better. So let's talk about El Nino first. We do see that forecast over the next 10 to 15 days that right here around the international dateline, see these cooler colors here? That would indicate stronger easterly winds in the low levels of the atmosphere, which is more La Nina-like than anything. And what that's doing at this particular stage in the game is that is changing how the precipitation is falling over here in Indonesia, keeping the Pacific cyclone track quite active, both in the East Pacific and in parts of the Central and West Pacific. It is also helping to suppress what's going on over here, because at the same time that we've got this, what appears to be La Nina-like pattern, we've convectively suppressed things over the Atlantic. So that those two things are a bit out of phase from one another, but they do at times work like that. So what I'm trying to say here is that we don't have a strong El Nino signature at this point, despite the warmer water west and the cooler water east. So now I'm intrigued by this very warm blob of water that's shown up in July and now at the beginning of August. So this next analysis we're about to do is to see its influences. So I'm going to show you two maps, each of the next 3 slides. The map on the left is going to be looking at the influence of the North Pacific warm blob and what happened in the subsequent Septembers of each of the years that had that warm North Pacific area of water. So these are the years that favored that in July and August. Now, what's interesting about this, first of all, is that normally when we have very warm water in the North Pacific, we also have it phased well with El Nino. So the positive phase of the PDO often shows up with the positive phase of INSO. So El Nino tends to go with the warm blob. We do not have that right now. You saw that a few moments ago, and this is what's interesting. Come over here to the map that's on the right. The maps that are going to be showing up on the right over here tell me what ocean temperatures, in this particular example, have to look like to get the midsection of the country, right in the heart of the Corn Belt, to be very warm. Normally what we want to see is warm water here and cool water there, which is very close to what we've currently got going now at the beginning of August, and also low sea ice concentration. So that is a vote toward September carrying a slight warm bias versus a cold bias. Let's keep going with this analysis. On the left again, when we had the warm water in the North Pacific, what did it tend to do to our 500 millibar high pattern, or the troughs and ridges? It tended to favor just offshore here a trough and a broader ridge that extended over the Great Lakes. It also tended to favor lower heights sitting here over parts of north of the Hudson. Now, on our warmest Septembers on record, we tended to have a very similar feature with a trough sitting here somewhere along the west coast of North America and a ridge over the Great Lakes states. Now, a big difference is this feature right over here, a much bigger ridge south of the Aleutian Islands. What does that warm Pacific blob tend to do? It tends to keep much of western North America very, very warm. But it may lend toward more ridging over the Great Lakes states as well. My point here is that even though the models have trended cooler, I think the major conclusion based upon this warm blob in the Pacific is that this is less supportive of that early frost or that cold spell in September. Okay? So I'm trying to just understand if the model runs we just got were anomalous in trying to bring in this cold air in mid-September, and I'm seeing that these ocean features might be working against that. That's all that I'm saying here. Finally, I told you that the wild card here is the tropical activity. We see that whenever we have that warm blob in the North Pacific, we often get very good support for Central Pacific and Eastern Pacific tropical cyclone activity, while things tend to be suppressed in terms of convective activity over the Amazon and parts of the Caribbean. Same thing with warm Septembers. See that? But I want you to know that when we're looking at these two maps, we may be just seeing the climatological normals coming out here, and that's a tricky thing to do. But I'm going to be watching for convective activity in the East Pacific and in the Caribbean, as well as hurricane activity and tropical typhoon activity in the West as our major indicators as to how the pattern's going to go. Other factors. Right now, the global winds. The global winds are still below average, but they've been increasing with time. We've seen this oscillating pattern in the strength of El Niño. In other words, it's bouncing around and INSO-neutral, but at times we get a little bit of a revival of it, but it's not strong. And we got to be watching, again, what's going on over Greenland. If one thing has the potential to really break down, it's that Greenland ridge. So we need to watch that very, very carefully. So what are my major conclusions from this? Because you may be confused as you get to the end of this video. Well, my major conclusion is that despite some of the new model runs, I think that the probability of us having a very, very cold September, which a lot of us are fearing right now, is low. I'm not overly confident in that, and therefore I'm going to ask you to continue to live with me inside of a 2-week forecast window moving forward. But we've got to talk about these bigger players, and that's why we release these videos. So this is a stay tuned video. We're going to have to watch this day after day, and that's why we release this particular one every week. Okay? So I'm going to stop right there, but tell you, tune in next week to see how this whole pattern evolves. Because right now, our forecast for August is panning out well. We need to see if that continues for the month of September. All right, we'll stop it right there. Thank you for watching. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.